webinar. I'm so excited to have all of you here today and to have this opportunity to show the electronic data capture system that we have available from BioPharm. To start, I am Michelle Engler. I am the Simple Forms developer. I'm the lead developer. I have been with BioPharm Systems since 1999. I put my contact information on this slide and the last slide so that if there are any follow-up questions, you can feel free to contact me and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. My background is I have an experience in developing in a lot of different languages. I love writing code in Perl. That's one of my favorite languages. I also write in C++, PL SQL, JavaScript, utilize AJAX technologies, which is the same technology that's actually used for Gmail, if you're familiar with that. I'm well versed in Oracle Clinical and Oracle Clinical technologies. I'm also very aware of the data capture API, and I've written several applications to utilize that piece of functionality from Oracle Clinical. I have a background in system design, compliance, and quality assurance. And I first want to just thank you all for being here. It's, like I said, it's a great opportunity to show you this product. It's something that I've been working on for a number of years, and it's exciting to have it in the state to display in this webinar. So the overview of the presentation is we'll go into what exactly is Simple Forms. I'll describe the two components of the system, the electronic data capture tool and the administration tool. I'll touch on the international support that is provided through Simple Forms, and then the email integrated functionality. And finally, we'll finish up with a live demo. So first of all, what is Simple Forms? It is a tool for collecting patient data. It is designed to be very intuitive. It was originally made to facilitate data entry from users that there wasn't a lot of control over what their operating system was or their browser or even their experience level. And in that, it was designed to be emulating the HTML forms that we see on the internet all the time. This Simple Forms integrates directly with Oracle Clinical. There has been some discussion about making it a standalone EDC solution, but as of now, it integrates directly with Oracle Clinical. It is accessed through your browser. It doesn't require any downloads or plugins. It is directly connected to Oracle Clinical, and it loads data and displays data real time. And it utilizes the existing clinical trial setup in Oracle Clinical. With Simple Forms, you can get your studies released in Simple Forms in a matter of minutes. And it also has the concept of being able to be customized extensively. So it has both of those supports for immediate use and also if you want to change the look and feel, how the user experience is laid out. All of those things are possible in Simple Forms. So it was originally developed in 2004 simply as an HTML form submission interface to Oracle Clinical. It would generate its forms off of the existing DCIs and DCMs, or for those of you that are not Oracle Clinical people, your CRFs. It would generate it directly off of them and then create a form that a user would just enter the data into the HTML form and submit it. In 2005, we had clients that were interested in making it into a full EDC solution. And so with the client support, we added the functionality of security and additional bells and whistles and filtering, and it has grown into what you're going to see today. Now, it's been used in production for approximately 6 years. It's been used for registry trials, phase 4 trials, patient diaries. It also can be used to collect survey data. Now, this isn't the limit of what it can do. This just is what it has been used for. So here are the pieces to Simple Forms. There are two major components. There's the admin tool, and as you see up here, there's a Simple Forms administrator, usually one person that will go in and configure Simple Forms to display the data to your users. And then all of that information that's set up in the admin tool is fed into what we call the EDC tool, and that is the tool that your Simple Forms users will see. The EDC tool is used to submit data directly into Oracle Clinical. That is the major interface that you'll be working with. The admin tool has a limited user base. But I will be showing you both of these today. So one of the interesting things of Simple Forms is that it has these different modes for collecting data. There is the standard mode, and the standard mode is kind of what you would expect for an EDC system. You log in, you see your sites and your patients, and you can filter them, and you can enter data or update data based on security settings. There also is the option of a survey mode. And what survey mode does is it assumes that we don't know who these patients are, or even if patient makes sense in our particular case for collecting clinical data. And in that, what the system does is it auto-increments the patient number. It doesn't really mean patient, but it's a way to get clinical data in the system and utilize our existing Oracle Clinical structures, reports, analysis, to look at that data alongside our clinical data. There's also the option of a patient diary mode. You can have a hybrid of all of these modes for a single study. But if you had a patient diary mode, a user would log in. They would have access to just one patient. It would go right into a data entry screen where they could enter the relevant data for the patient diary. And finally, it has a timed mode. For our studies, we often have a timeline when we expect a visit to occur. Now, with Simple Forms, you can set up this timeline based on when an enrollment form is collected or based on a master date for the study. And based on that, you can control what is available to the users for entering data at a given time. You can also, on the other side, use that timeline to send notifications out to your users to help facilitate the data entry. If a new visit is just opened or if there are overdue forms that weren't submitted, Simple Forms allows this sort of notification email to get set up and to help keep our submissions on track. So what is the user experience for Simple Forms? It's designed to be very, very simple. You log in, you filter your patients, and you enter your data. So I took this opportunity to put some screenshots into this presentation and then put some of the functionality descriptions in these slides. So here's a login screen. It's pretty standard. But I want to point out that users for Simple Forms can integrate with existing Oracle Clinical users. It can also be integrated with Active Directory, or we can have local Simple Forms users. And we can use a hybrid of all of these things. And really what that means is that the password and the account names, they come from these systems that we're already using. And that helps us to facilitate just the user experience and not having to have multiple usernames and passwords, to just really use use one to access all these systems. Simple Forms is compliant with the 21 Part 11. And that passwords that are in the system are encrypted. It does have session timeouts if there's inactivity. If a user tries to log in a configurable amount of times unsuccessfully, they will get locked out of the system and have to contact an administrator. The other thing that is in here is that Simple Forms is international and that it is actually available in 5 different languages, English, French, German, Spanish, and one more. one more that's slipping my mind right now, but we will find it later on these screens. But you can actually set your preferred language on the login screen, and we can actually have the same study be collected in multiple languages and go into the same group of data. So I'll show more about that a little bit later. After a user logs in, what do they see? They go into these, they have the option of going into these screens where they can further filter their data. Now they're only going to have access to the sites and patients that are available to them and set through the user security settings. Within what they have accessibility to, they can further filter down which patients are they really interested, which patients maybe have data already or do not have data. Maybe they want to work within a patient range. It can work just for a particular site. All of that is possible on these filtering screens. And you can further filter the data down if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, into which visits do I want. Maybe I want a particular form or form status I'm looking for. You can also work with that. Now in these screenshots, and I'll show you this live where it won't be so small, but you may notice that I have these additional columns. We have patients, and I have patient initials, date of birth, allergic. These are custom columns, and these are configurable on a study-to-study basis. And we can just add additional information on these filtering screens to help us have a frame of reference. Maybe in your company or your studies you have a device serial number. That is really how you track your patients. You could put that then on this main screen, which would really help to facilitate a frame of reference. So beyond that, you just would go into what we call the form completion screen, and this is pretty straightforward here. All of your security settings, of course, are enforced. We can print the case report forms details. We can work with unscheduled forms being added. There is automatically on the forms, all your univariate checks are real-time. They're done through JavaScript technology, and so if you do not enter the data, if you enter a univariate error, it will actually prevent you from submitting that data until that is correct. You also have the ability to add more complex checks as well. And it does this automatic progression through the case report form. So the EDC tool itself is simple. It's designed to be that way. But the real interesting part here is how do we actually get this set up? And that's where I'm going into next here. Actually, I just want to mention that Simple Forms is designed to be compatible with Oracle Clinical Structures, and that includes what you see here. Your repeating question groups and defaults and things that you're already working with in Oracle Clinical. Simple Forms are designed to handle. Okay, so the admin tool. Now this is where the setup is done. And what I really want to get across here today is that if I wanted to get this up and going for my existing studies, it is actually a pretty simple process. We have these concepts of book templates that would be analogous to a DCI book. And a DCI book or book template is basically just saying, I expect this form on this visit. It's laying out how we want to collect our data. I can have multiple book templates for a given study. I may have different ones for a different user base. That's all possible in Simple Forms. And then your form templates are actually analogous to your DCIs. And I'll show you all this live. I think that will probably be the best way to touch on this functionality. So here are the book templates. And the important thing is, as I mentioned, they come from DCI books. They're generated from it. It takes 3 clicks for me to get a book template up, generated, and released in Simple Forms. So then also, after I have created my book template, I have to give security here. And here is the Set User Security screen. And I'll show you this live again. But the important part is that you have all these different levels at which you can set your security. You can set it so that they have certain access to some patients and different access to others. You can organize it by site. You can organize it by book. So all of that is possible within this user security screen. And this would be the next step after I created a book on how to actually make that book available to my users. And after that, it's available, and that's it. So it's a really simple process. And I just wanted to throw this screen up here. There's a lot more functionality in Simple Forms. I just don't have time to get into all of it today. We may have some follow-up webinars if there's interest to kind of go in some of the more specialized features of Simple Forms. But I just want to throw this up here to see, to mention that yes, we can set up our unscheduled events. We can add dynamic text to our forms. We can configure the look and feel. We have a lot of flexibility here with this tool. So this is one of the more new features of Simple Forms, in that we have made it international. We have made it support, it's Italian, yes. We have made it support these 5 different languages. And the really interesting thing about that is that these different languages are done through a configuration table. And that means that even English, all of the prompts are configurable. Everything that you see on the EDC tool. If you don't call patient in your organization, it is very simple for us to change that to subject. And it's a matter of an installation configuration option. And so that goes throughout everything that you see on the EDC tool, including the alerts. Just all of that terminology is flexible. And the other aspect of it, which is really something I haven't seen before, is it does allow these multiple languages to all feed into a single study. And we do that by using drop-down lists, mostly for collecting our data, where the value that actually gets inserted is a singular language, but the value that's displayed to the user is the translated version. And in all of this, international date formats are supported, of course. And then I had mentioned this about the email notification. One other point here is that you can set up a form to email one or more users just on the submission of that form. And you may want to do this for adverse event forms or for various reasons that you just want to make sure that real time your users or maybe your CRAs or someone who's responsible for the study is able to get notification if a particular form is submitted. And then, of course, we have this ability to send notifications to help facilitate the data entry, as I had mentioned earlier. And this last slide I put up here just for the people that are more interested in the hardware configuration of Simple Forms. I want to convey that Simple Forms is very easy to install. This is not a heavyweight system. It is a validated system. It can work within your existing Oracle clinical structure. We can host it. It can be released on the greater internet. And you'll see in this diagram, we say port 80 or 8000. It can also be SSL. And so a very standard installation would be that we install Simple Forms within its own schema in your Oracle clinical database. We do not touch the Oracle clinical objects or compromise your validation in any way. It simply will read from Oracle Clinical, and data is submitted through the validated API interface. The front-end application is installed on, tends to be, doesn't have to be, but is installed on the Oracle Clinical Application Server. So these are things that you already have in your organization. And there's 2 different configuration options here that are being displayed, but just sort of to give a gist of what it can do. So that's it. I would like to go into the live demo. Now, as I said, if there are any questions, please feel free to propose them on chat. And also, if I don't get to all the questions today, I am available for follow-up questions via email or phone as needed. So, without further ado, share here. I just want to take a minute here to take a look at some of these questions. Thank you for these. One question is, will the recording be available later? Yes, it will. And the logo absolutely can be changed. It does not have to say BioPharm. All of our clients have customized the logo, and some have even customized the look and feel. It's handled through cascading style sheets, which means it's globally easy to change color schemes or layouts, that kind of thing. Cost information can be, you follow up with me and we can discuss what your particular needs are, and I can convey that information. Okay. And of course the slides will be made available. So let's see. Let's go into simple form. I want to make sure you can see. I'm going to double check this. Yes. Okay. So here is the login screen of Simple Forms. I'm going to log in and just show you what the end user experience would be like for perhaps a CRA. I'm going to log in with a CRA account. I click Login here. It's going to go into my book template and show my first filter screen. And so things to note on this screen is, as I had mentioned, here are the custom fields, the patient initials, date of birth, allergic. These are, allergic. You probably wouldn't put that on your particular book template, but it was just to show that you can put any sort of data response that is relevant to your patient or any other identifying information into this with ease. And there is no limit to how many that you can have. And then you can see, it has this, does this patient have data or not have data? One of the ways that data entry seems to happen a lot is, I just want to work with the patients that have data, or I just want to work with the ones that don't. So this screen is really set to be fast. I want to see ones that have no data. For example, I click Has No Data, I say Show Patients, and it's going to go out and query and then just bring up the patients that don't have any data. Now, from here, I'm going to actually go and show all because I want to show you the next screen. Another way is if I want to filter further down on my patients, I can select the patients of interest, and then I can click this button, Show Patient Visits. Now that'll go into a patient visit screen where I'm now at more of the details. And you can see again, I've got my patient number, I've got my custom columns, and then I have my visits. And within my visits, I have these icons, and there's only 4 to remember. The check mark means that they've completed this visit. The yellow means that this visit has some saved forms in it. And the S means that one or more, but not all, of the forms expected for this visit have been completed. And there's also a key down here to help facilitate that. So in this particular screen, I could select 1 or more visits and filter down. And whatever I do select in my filtering criteria is carried forth to the data entry screen. So maybe I had a stack of demographic forms and I had to enter them for a group of patients. Well, I could then filter down and say, I just want my demographic forms, and then it will go only through those when I'm doing my data entry. For purposes of this demonstration, I want to show you all of the forms, and so I'm going to leave it open here. And I'm going to show that you can click on any of these boxes to go into the form completion screen. So in this case, let's just go into the first patient in the enrollment form. And here, this is the demographics form generated straight from the Oracle Clinical Demographics form. I have not customized this in any way. Certainly it can be customized. The global look and feel of this can be customized, but in this case I have not. And here I just want to show a couple of things. Here is a form date. It will automatically populate that with the current date if I want it to. I can change it. I have a little calendar icon here to help facilitate changing the date. I have my patient initials. Of course, your drop-down list can come from your DBG list. You can also make this come from a custom list of values. If you have a custom table available and you want to use those values, you can. Date of birth date fields are supporting international format. They also support shortcut data entry. By just typing in a portion of the date and tabbing off the field, it will auto-format it. I can set it up so that I have a multivariate check. So here I have ethnic background if it's other, and I leave other blank, and I click submit. It's going to come up and say, oh, you need to specify your other ethnic background. So I can do that. And so I will click submit here. And what happens is now I'm updating a form, and you can see that the icon is still processing. We did that because it takes some time for the data capture API, especially for longer forms, to complete. And instead of waiting for that process to complete and having our user kind of hang on the line, we've decided to progress the forms and let that process complete asynchronously. And that means that it will complete and the icon will update, and I can go back and look at my updated responses later. If there is an error icon would appear, and if I clicked on it, it would come up and show me the error. Now, the idea of simple forms is not to have these submission errors, and that's why we have the univariate checks built into the fields automatically. So, for example, if I typed in characters and the date of birth and I click submit, it would say your date of birth is invalid. I click OK. It'll bring my icon my cursor right to where I need to be to fix that. It also handles alpha DVGs, and that's what these 3 dots are. If I click on that, it will come up with my available alternate values, which I select will go into the date of birth, and then I can submit the form. As another point is that it does tell you if you're going to lose your data by not submitting before you change, and that's what this alert is all about. I'm going to say, okay, that's fine to lose the data. Now, in this form, I did some minor modifications just to show that it can be done. I put on a dynamic patient number here, and I changed the way the prompts look here. And I set it up so that if you select yes and tab off the field, it'll give you a warning and saying, this is exclusion criteria, and if you say yes, this patient can't be part of the trial. It'll still let me keep that value, but it's a warning just to help control what's being entered. Another point is that I don't know that you'd do what I did here, but you could put pictures on here. And generally, I think you'd use pictures that were helping to facilitate data entry. Maybe there's a diagram or just some way to make it easier to enter the data. You can add pictures or add layout as much as you want to, but you don't have to. And that's really the key here. As you see in demographics, it works just fine generated. And you can then also change it. And you can see here that I've added adverse event, and this is an unscheduled form. And what that does is it increments the sub-event number, and you can add them to any visits. I can control where they can be added, what forms can be added. All of that is configurable within the book template. So, and then here's another example. I put a dynamic prompt on the termination form, where it just lists out what the patient initials are, and it got that off of the demographics form. And again, if you had a serial number or something that you wanted to see instead of this header information, you could control that fairly easily. And then finally, if I wanted to print the form, there's a little icon here for printing form, and it would just come up with the value, and then I could print this particular screen, show it to my manager, keep it for my records, whatever I need to do. So that's basically the EDC tool, and it's all hunky-dory, but if this takes 3 weeks to set up, who wants to deal with that? So what I'd like to do is just show you, if I had a study, how easy it is to get it up and going in simple forms. And so now I've switched over to the administration tool, and I'm going to log in as the admin here. And if I had a new study, the first thing I would do is add the study by going to this new OC study functionality. I don't need to add the study because the study I'm working in already exists. But here is actually where you would set up your study to be English only or multilingual in the case that you had, you had a study that was available in these other languages. You could then put the description here in the other languages to be displayed to the user appropriately, depending on what language they've selected. But let's say, our study's already added, so I'm just going to come in here and create what is a new book template. I click on New Book Template, I select my study, and it goes out to Oracle Clinical and finds all of the available DCI books. In this case, I'm going to select my main DCI book. I have these 2 different book types, and this goes back to the modes that we had talked about. of standard or survey. Standard mode is what I've shown you. Survey mode would go right into the form completion screen and just give you a message afterwards, thank you for submitting the data. And I'll show you that if there's time permitting today. But right now we'll do standard mode. I can also control which screen. There's 3 screens in the EDC tool. Which screen is going to display? Which screen is going to display first if somebody uses this book? I'm going to leave it at the patient set screen. That's pretty standard. I'm going to give my book a book name, say it's an English book, and give it a description. And then general descriptions and simple forms are what are shown to the users, and the names are your internal reference points. I click Save. It goes out to Oracle Clinical, creates my book template, and then it makes this link here if I want to edit my webinar, and I do. So I'm going to click there, and it comes into this screen that has all the information that I need for setting up my book template. And the important part to look at here is we have our proposed form template names and our descriptions and our events. And this would be the map of how the data will be collected in your study. Now, one of the easy things to do here is just make our form descriptions or our event descriptions a little bit nicer to look at, a little bit more user-friendly. You don't have to do that, but that's one of your options. So in this case, I have my book template. It's been created. I don't really want to customize it too much. I could add custom columns if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to click Generate. And here it's going to go out. It's going to make actual HTML files for each of the unique forms in this book template. I have to activate it, click Save. And now all I need to do is give access to this particular book template. So now I'm going to go to Set User Security, and I'm going to give access to the admin user just because it's easy for me to remember. And so I'll just show you that. We have the admin user. I would add a row, select my study. It would go out and find all of my active books. In this case, I'm going to select the webinar book we just created. I could give access to all the sites or just one site. I could give access to all the patients or one patient within the site. We'll just do all patients here. And this is where, again, I have a level of access control. So I click Save. And now what I'm going to do is log in as the admin user and show you what we just created. So I log in, and this probably is a familiar screen to you. Now I don't have my custom columns here. I didn't add them to this book template, but it has all the same information here of the patient and whether it has data or not. And I could go into the further filtering of it by going into the patient visit screen, or I could just jump into data entry by clicking on this has data or the patient number. And here is the form that was generated. And here is the exclusion criteria form, which I had modified in my prior one, but this is what it looks like generated. And you can also note that I had modified some of those descriptions. It was fairly easy to do so. And here I can see it comes forth in the EDC tool. Here's demographic, here's enrollment, the ones that I had modified, and you can see the ones that I have not modified. So, and also you can see that it still has these checks on here. The univariate checks were automatically put on the form. Another feature that I haven't shown yet is the Save feature. I have to find a form that hasn't been submitted yet. Here we go. Save allows you to save any data in the form for later recall. It does not run the checks, and that's helpful because sometimes you need more information to resolve a particular univariate error. So in this case, I added some data. It's obviously not what we want to see in the form, but I can click Save, and I can come back to this then later after I get my questions answered or have lunch or whatever I need to do. So that's how simple it is to actually get your studies up and going in simple forms. Another feature I'd like to touch on here is just the way the email notifications and the timelines would work for this tool. Let me see if I have any. Okay. So in a study, we have our timeline. And in simple forms, we call those event timings. And this is pulled from your existing clinical study, clinical plan event set up, where you have your min and your max values set up, and you can configure when do you expect the forms from the start date to be collected. And in this case, you have the option of either having a CRF or a master study date. If I had a CRF set here, maybe I had an enrollment form. That means that if that enrollment form is collected on January 1st for patient 1, that patient 1's timeline would start on January 1st. And it could be collected on January 10th for patient 2, and patient 2's timeline would start on January 10th. So you can have that sort of disparity set in there. But you can also do a master study date where you just enter a date that I want the study to start, and this is my standard timeline. Why would you do this? There's two reasons. One is to facilitate data entry, and I'd like to show you that. I had actually set up these 3 patients with patient diary settings, and I put them on a timed setting. So here's patient 1. I log in. I have access to just my patient, and I'm working within a timeline. And in this case, I'm in week 1. So I would log in, and I would only see week 1 because that's what I'm working in. And it's based on the demographics form, which was entered by my CRA. And so in here I can set up, I can submit all this information. You can see some of these indicator questions. You know, this is how it handles it. It shows it if it's there. You can see repeating questions. I can add rows and remove rows. This is just some of the functionality support of existing Oracle clinical objects. For simplicity's sake, though, I'm going to enter fewer values rather than more. I submit it. It goes in. And then we have, how are you feeling this week? I'm just going to say great. Click submit, confirm. And then it's going to say that's my last form in this time period. And it will submit it. And so then I would wait for week 2. I would log in, and then week 2 would appear. So let's look if I had patient 2 set up. Patient 2 collected its demographics information a week ago. So when I log in, I'm going to see that we are now in week 2. And here are the forms that are collected in that point. So this is one of those ways that you can facilitate your data entry for a particular user base. And you don't have to do this for all of your users. You can do it for some of them and not for others. You can also have different forms shown to different users for the same study. And that's really helpful to facilitate data entry because as a CRA, I may want to have access to all of this information, the patient diary and the standard visit forms that I'm collecting, and I will have that control with the way that Simple Forms is designed. Furthermore, in the administration tool, we have this email scheduler. And this email scheduler, you can set up, you can select your, let's try this again. There we go. You select your study, and then select the book that you are working with, and then you can set up these action events. Now our users can be set up into groups, and then based on their security settings, they can get these notifications sent to them. When is my event due? When is a new visit opening? I can have a summary of all the emails that are sent to an administrative user. And this is just really helpful to help control data entry getting in and to make sure that we're following our timeline, we're not missing anything. And all of this, of course, is configurable. Finally, I wanted to show you briefly the survey mode, and then I'll look at the questions and see if I can answer some of those online before our webinar is done. So I have a survey set up in here, which is just kind of set up to show the system. If I were to log in as a user with access to a survey study, it would go into the form completion screen. And because there's only one survey to submit, it hides all of the, the visit information, which isn't really relevant in case of a survey. Now here what it's doing is going to the next available patient to submit data for that patient. And here I could enter my name, my company, whatever I needed to. currently using a EDC system. I said yes. I could say I'm using remote data capture. Here's information I'm interested in. And you see there's check boxes on the screen. We can also do radio buttons. Sky is really the limit of what you want to see here. And then when I click Submit, this time it's going to submit it to the Data Capture API, and it will wait for that process to complete. And when it completes, it will say, thanks for submitting your data. So that's another way that you can collect data in Oracle or in Simple Forms using survey mode. So now what I'd like to do is look at some of the questions and see if I can answer them online here. So let's see here. Bear with me for a second. As a question about performance of Simple Forms. Well, I mean, I think RDC versus RDC, and there's been a lot of work done on Simple Forms in terms of performance. It's one of the missions of the system is to make it easy to use and fast. I haven't done any metrics directly in comparison to RDC. I know that they also have been working with that. But what I'm getting as feedback about Simple Forms is that it's fast and that the data entry people are happy with the performance of both the filtering screens and the submission. What we're looking at here, I was accessing Simple Forms from my home internet, and there's nothing special about it. So the speed that you're seeing here is comparable to what you would see in your environment. Tablet devices, yes. We are going to be certifying Simple Forms on the iPad in the next month, which is really very exciting. There's not a lot to do in order to have that happen. Because Simple Forms was developed to be accessible through Macintosh or PCs, it's already primed to be utilized on the iPad. I don't think, because of the architecture, that it would work very well on a smaller device. But it perhaps could for the survey mode. It's just something that we have not done a lot of research on. But definitely on the iPad, that is coming and coming soon. This does work on Oracle Clinical versions. We started at, I think, 4.0. So it works on multiple Oracle Clinical versions. And recently it's been utilized on 4.6. Okay. Let's see. Close. The intervals, okay, so I have a question, where are the intervals defined? So the intervals are clinical planned events. They're defined with your study. And then you can determine with your structure of the book template which intervals are relevant to your particular book template. You can look at the book template or think of it as a view into your study. And in that, maybe part of the intervals are applicable to some users and some are applicable to others. But they have, of course, in Simple Forms, they have to integrate with Oracle Clinical. So, there has to be that connection that if we are submitting on an interval or visit, it has to exist in Oracle Clinical as well. There's a question about the Reset Form button on the form completion screen. Let me see if I can bring that up here, and I can show you what that looks like. Let me go back to logging on. So the Reset Form button right here, what that does is it takes us back to the state, the last saved state. So if I have some values in here and I wanted to just clear it, I click Reset. It asks me if it should go back to the original state, and then it does. Now in the case I already had data in the form, and I click Reset Form, again, it goes back to the original state. So that's what Reset Form does. As far as password controls, that's a good question. There's a question regarding password controls. Yes, I mean, Simple Forms can be integrated with Oracle users, and in that, if you have a Oracle profile which does put constraints on what the password lengths are and what they have to be made up of and if they can reuse them, all of those things can be leveraged within Simple Forms because of its integration with these external systems. Regarding how many users can be logged on to a study at the same time, there is no limit. It's completely open. There's another question here about are there audit trails in OC? Absolutely. There are absolutely audit trails in this system. It is fully compliant. We keep an audit trail when data is submitted, who submits it, and then it goes to the data capture API and follows all of the constraints of Oracle Clinical. And so if we're doing an update, it keeps track of what the changes are, similar to if you did it through RDC or through Oracle Clinical. And in that, you can use all of these systems together. Simple Forms does not require that it's the only EDC solution. It will integrate just fine with RDC, and some of our clients do use it that way. Can the fonts on the data screen be customized bigger? Oh, yes. We can customize the look and feel to your heart's content. It's very easy to update all of the prompts, for example, a certain way because we're using this cascading style sheet technology. And we can also configure certain studies to have different look and feel than other studies. So that's one of the advantages of the way the web technology has gone in the past 5 to 10 years, and that we do have this global control of the styles of our application here. Can reports be integrated in Simple Forms? Yes, absolutely. Your existing reports in Oracle Clinical, ones that you use for your organization, they all are relevant within Simple Forms. Again, this is just another way to get your data in, and it's going in a compliant way. And so anything like your data extracts or if you had just whatever reports you have available, you're absolutely able to use them. And furthermore, we're in the middle of doing a minor enhancement of Simple Forms to make it so that the data that a user is able to see can be downloaded into an Excel spreadsheet for review. And that option can be turned on or off. But that makes it so that if we wanted to work with the data outside of Simple Forms and not have to go through the normal channels of data extract and all of that, that is possible. Okay. How does external data loading how is that handled in Simple Forms? So, if we're integrating from another system and we need to do external data loading, the same facilities that are available for data loading in Oracle Clinical are available when you're using Simple Forms. So that may be that you're doing batch data load to get your data in, but certainly that is possible. There's another tool that we are working with at BioPharm to help with data migration, and that allows us to also get data into Oracle Clinical. So there's different ways to do that. It's an independent functionality from Simple Forms. Again, Simple Forms is really, really there to get the data in, get it in cleanly, give a good user interface that is easy to use, easily understandable for your users to leverage. Here's a question about how the data is extracted. Is the data available in the views as an OC? Absolutely. I mean, we are submitting our data into Oracle Clinical. It goes to the Data Capture API. It is available just as any data in Oracle Clinical would be available. And again, we will have this report where you can also extract it into an Excel spreadsheet for more of a user interface way of looking at your data. Okay. So now I have a question about PDRs. Is there an option to generate patient data reports that show the Simple Forms screens from within Simple Forms, or will we need to generate graphic layouts in OC for this? You know, right now it's set up to be able to print a particular form. We don't have a report that puts it all into the graphic layout into one report. It is something that's been talked about, but what we decided to do instead of doing the graphic layout is to go into just getting it into Excel to be in a workable format. It's one of those things that would be a minor enhancement to the system in order to get it all out in a CRF-looking way. Here's a question about medical coding. Would that be done with TMS? It probably would. I mean, Simple Forms is not a coding system. You know, within reason, you could set it up to do dynamic lists. If you selected a particular verbatim term, it could automatically populate up the hierarchy. It really isn't designed to do that. I think you would still be working with the TMS system. And in that, Simple Forms has the ability to display derived fields. And so if you're doing coding and you want to see that coding in Simple Forms, that is something that is supported in Simple Forms. I have 3 more minutes here. Is there any more questions? Let me see if I missed any. Reports to be integrated. Oh, absolutely. Okay. Here's a question. Can you expand your discussion on dynamic DVGs? Absolutely. So this is one of those things I really love about Simple Forms is the flexibility and how it handles these drop-down lists. Of course, there's a lot of different angles to go at this, but we have our standard list of values that we set up in Oracle Clinical. And you want to be able to select those. But then in some cases you have lists of values that are constantly changing. And it's not something that you want to have to update your forms all the time. You don't want that to be static. And so in Simple Forms, there's a single checkbox in the form template screen that you can check to say this is an active LOV. And what that means is that real time it'll go out and get those values when that form is accessed. And you don't have to worry about your discrete value groups growing or changing. It will automatically support that. And also, sometimes you may have like a list of values that really aren't DVGs, but maybe you have a table set up in Oracle and that table lists out like a ton of values. You can link those values to a Simple Forms drop-down list very easily. You can put what is a Oracle select statement into a field, and it will automatically go and get those values. And furthermore, you can integrate responses to fields, to questions, to be running database functions. And so for those of you that aren't as technical, what that means is you can have values calculated, very complicated calculations can go into coming up with what the value would be, and you can have it done real time when the form is accessed. So there is really a lot of integration with trying to facilitate how these lists are displayed and how to support the client or support the study. So that concludes our webinar for today, and my contact information is on the screen. Certainly, this is a recorded webinar, and I think it will be sent within 24 hours. Eugene Stefanoff has been the one that's been coordinating this, and so he will be in touch with the recorded version of the webinar. But I just want to extend the invitation to contact me with any questions. If you want to see other functionality in the system, or you have questions about pricing or how it would be installed, all of those things, please don't hesitate to contact me by phone or by email. I really do appreciate your time here today, and look forward to hearing from you. So thank you very much.